Hi, I'm Meinu Vaid, and today I have brought a trilogy of thrillers to review for you. The trilogy has been written by Holly Jackson, but I'll take one book at a time. All right. So the first book is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. It's by Holly Jackson. All right. So this is about a student, a teenager, Pippa Fitz Amobi, and she lives with her mother, stepfather, and stepbrother in a small town called Little Kilton. 5 years ago, a girl named Andy Bell had disappeared, and her boyfriend had allegedly committed suicide, and the case had been considered closed from the police side. But then there is this project that she has to undertake, and she's a straight A student. So she happens to pick this particular case as a topic for her project. And then she starts interviewing people, and the first person she contacts is Andy's boyfriend. Sal Singh is what he's called throughout, but his name is Salil. It's an Indian name, and it's an Indian family. So she contacts his brother Ravi and gets back together. They form a sort of a coalition. They get together on trying to solve this murder case because Pippa deep down believes that Sal never committed this murder. And she knew him at a personal level, not very intimately, but otherwise, and she was convinced that he was innocent. So this is how it all starts. Towards the end, of course, they end up being in a relationship of sorts. They become good friends. They start investigating the whole thing like a team. And now, what are the USPs of this thriller? First of all, when I read about, this being a thriller wherein the protagonist is a teenager, I didn't have high hopes, that what will she do and what will happen here. But then I was pleasantly surprised because, she takes this whole project in a very logical manner. There is a very step by step approach which really appeals to me as a Virgo, honestly. I could totally relate to it. So she approaches everything step by step. She records everything. She creates these elaborate logs into her laptop wherein she types everything, how, which interview went. She records it all there. So the whole format over there, every time she does some work for her project, is very interesting actually. And towards the end, she ends up solving a double murder case. And please note that the police had considered this case as closed, and they had just come to the conclusion that Sal Singh, being Andy's boyfriend, had killed her and her body had never been found. So she investigates it all and she brings the culprits to the light. And there is another murder also that happens. She also brings that to light. In the process, she happens to lose her dog also. Now, if we talk about the title, I'm not very convinced. Pippa is your typical good girl, of course. She doesn't party much. She's a straight A student. She thinks party is somebody else's idea of having fun. She herself is not into all these things like other teenagers. She is the conventional good girl, but the question is the title justified? In book two, they try to justify this title to some extent, but I am not convinced. I mean, it is something written by a good girl, but is it a guide to murder? I don't think so. So I'm not very convinced with that. But other than that, if I compare it with some of the classics, something like Sherlock Holmes. Now, those stories used to be really interesting, but then Sherlock Holmes never took you inside his head. He didn't allow you any space into, what he was thinking and how he was solving the case. It was just, telling Dr. Watson that you reach so and so place and he would just solve it all for you. So, although the cases themselves were very interesting according to those times, of course, but then I never was able to participate as a reader into those kinds of mysteries and thrillers. Whereas here, Pippa takes you on a journey together. You are able to see majority of things through her eyes. So you are able to, see how her brain is going and working on things and how she's analyzing stuff. And you get to see the same thing when she's making connections. She takes you on that journey with her, and that is very special. Another thing I enjoyed was reading those logs of her that, shows the intricacies of her mind, how her brain works, and how she was cracking it all and coming closer and closer to solving the case. So, again, that was very interesting. So, this I think is a USP wherein I wasn't expecting much out of a teenager, and then she ends up surprising me. So, that much for the first book. So the second book is Good Girl, Bad Blood. Now here things, as you can see, get quite bloody here. Now the question is it connected to the first book? Then yes. This is one of those rare trilogies where you really had to know what went before in the previous book to be able to connect some dots, because I found some loose ends there. So, in this book now, what happens is that Pippa has become very famous in her town and she starts this podcast channel wherein she starts talking about her experience of case number one that she happened to solve. She talks about it at length in the form of episodes. And now people trust her so much that one of her friend's brother goes missing, and the friend approaches her particularly to investigate this particular case of his. Initially she's reluctant about it because she's the kind of person who really gets into the thick of things, and she gets totally obsessed with the case, and she knew that. But she couldn't say no to a friend, so she starts investigating that. And surprisingly, in the end, we come across a gentleman who is unearthed and uncovered as a previous serial killer, or shall we say an accessory to a serial killer, but very closely associated with a serial killer as such. And he had been hiding all this time in their town, and she happens to uncover his identity. And of course, in the process, she happens to, save and find the friend's brother. But then in the process, there's a lot of blood, hence the mention in the title itself. And this time she is witness to this murder happening, which naturally is very traumatic for her, and it takes a toll on her mental health. And then comes the third book. And before I move on to the third book, let me tell you the second book, the USPs, again, the episodes of the podcast. I really enjoy those things, wherein she interviews people and she records them. Now she has become more professional about the whole thing, and then she records all of those, and then she releases those episodes. Now, As Good as Dead is the third book in this series, and now this time she herself is being stalked by a serial killer. And mind you, somebody else had taken the fall for the serial killer, and he had not been operating, he had not been very active in the past few years, and somebody else had been imprisoned in his place. Of course, she gets into the thick of things. This is third thing that is happening in her small town, and this time she couldn't help not getting involved because she herself was the target, and she had been receiving these constant threats in the comment that who will look for you if you disappear. So that was very intriguing. And of course, towards the end, she happens to crack this case. Now, let me say, out of all the three books, I didn't enjoy the third one the most, especially the first, 120 pages or so. It's all about her trauma, which is understandable, but I felt it was just a little too much to bear. So first 100 odd pages are devoted to, how she heard those bullets in her mind and how she felt that all the time. There was blood on her hands and everything. So all that obsession was constantly there. So I didn't enjoy that part so much. And to overcome all of that trauma, she starts relying on things like Prozac and medicines which are available at the pharmacies only when you have a prescription for it. And she starts acquiring them illegally. But then ultimately she cracks this case also. And the best part about all three books is that she takes you on her journey and she lets you in on her thought process. You are invited to be there to witness whatever she is investigating at the moment and the way she's thinking and what she's seeing. So you're able to see most things from her eyes. And of course, she and Ravi make a team. But then the plot of this third book was a little too much for me to digest. I think it became a little over ambitious on the author's part, because you should read it to find it out. You know what I'm saying. You know how this couple collaborates and tries to cover up a murder, and the funny part is, in today's time and age, with so much of technology and advancement is things, I don't know whether it's possible. Forensic science has gone way ahead in that respect. So I found a little too ambitious the plot of this book, wherein the last segment where they try to cover up a murder is just a little too much for me to take. So, barring this third book, I mean, it's overall, I really enjoyed reading all these three books. I was always looking forward to what will happen next, and that kept me going and wanting to reach out for the next chapter. So, that is one interesting thing that should be there in any thriller that you happen to read, and that kept my interest going, and I was picked all along. So I thought I'll read all three books together, because initially I thought I'll put out the review of the first book, but then I felt that would be incomplete, and honestly I was so taken by the book that I really wanted to go through till the third book, and I'm glad I purchased all three and happened to read them, because I really, really thoroughly enjoyed them. So, yeah, I would recommend all these three books. I mean, at least the first two for sure. If you want to drop the third one, that's okay. But then I'm sure once you have read the first two parts, you would want to know what happens next. So, I hope you like this review and you found it satisfactory. So, till we meet again, take care.